I'd like to call this meeting back to order, and we'll continue on where we left off with number 28, Department's Biennial Budget. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to say we had our committee meeting on the Thursday, and we actually got to see the budget, or I did anyway, on Tuesday, and it was supposed to be an action item on our committee meeting. I canceled that because of the fact that we didn't have time to review it from Tuesday to Thursday. It's pretty extensive. I would like to say that Deputy Director Cates did call on Wednesday, I believe it was. We had a conference call with Chairman, myself, and Deputy Director Cates. I believe the Director was there, and also the other Deputy Director Haskins was there also, I believe. And it was very, very informative. He took us right through everything, and I'd like him to elaborate a little bit on it today. But the one thing that we absolutely have to do with the next legislature committee is we've got to change the time frame for reviewing the budget. It seems to be that it's going to be impossible to accomplish, and so we either have to comply with the law or change the law, one or the other. And that was the main thing that I took out of it, is the fact that there was no time, and there's nobody's, it's really nobody's fault, it doesn't seem to be. It's just time constraints involved. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Deputy Director Cates.
Mr. Cates.
Thank you. For the record, Patrick Cates. You should have a handout of a presentation I gave to the Finance Committee, and it was set out for the audience. I'll try to go through that as quickly as I can and give you an overview. The budget was submitted to the Executive Budget Office on September 1st. In terms of sort of the budgeting process, that was the agency's draft agency request budget. From now until the end of the year, we'll be in the Governor recommends phase of the budget. We're already working with the Executive Budget Office on adjustments to that budget. They're reviewing it. Right now they're just doing technical adjustments. They seem quite pleased with the product that we produced in terms of the budget splits. After that is completed, the governor will present his budget as part of the State of the State speech in early January, mid-January, and then submit it to the legislature. The legislature will then consider it and will presumably approve it at some point during the session. So this proposed budget that I'm about to walk you through would be effective July 1 of next year. Until then, it's draft, and it's got to go through a lot of public processes and internal processes for review. And I think the start of that was presenting it to the Finance Committee and presenting it to you all today. With that, I'll turn to page 2. Page number 2 shows a chart of our overall budget split plan. You may recall that we were mandated by the legislature in the last session to split out our budget accounts to facilitate transparency and budget tracking. We basically went from one large administrative account to 8 separate budget accounts, one for each division, as well as centralizing all of our fee-based revenue in one wildlife account where we can separately track it and have segregated reserves for the different types of funding. I'm very pleased with how that has turned out. I think that is going to be a dramatic enhancement, not only for transparency, for people to see what each of our divisions actually costs and how they're funded, but it's also going to help us internally to track and provide information in a timely manner. The next couple of pages, page 3 and 4, show you a very summary level of the new operating budgets, one for each division. You can see in that all of the various funding sources: general funds, federal funds, unrestricted fees, restricted fees, boating fees, and other revenue. And just by way of definition, unrestricted fees are general license dollars and various fees that we collect that do not have a statutory restriction on their use. We call those unrestricted fees. These are the monies that we used to carry in balance in our NDOW administrative account. They're now all combined in 4458, and then we transfer those monies into these budgets as needed for operation. So you can see all the revenue coming in, and then you can see how we're funding each division with those fees. Restricted fees are what used to be referred to as obligated reserve. Those are the fees that we collect that do have statutory restrictions on their use. Duck stamp and upland game are prime examples of that. Boating fees, we used to have a separate boating account. We need to keep those fees separate as well. When we prepared the budgets, they're really, although I'm very pleased with the structure, we do have some issues that we need to deal with in terms of funding levels to make sure that our programs stay solvent through the next biennium. And so I want to walk you through that a little bit. I'm on page 5, revenue history. In the 2005 session, we had, was the last time we had a fee increase. That was across the board fee increases in many categories. As a result of that, 2007, fiscal year 2007, we just completed fiscal year 2010. We're now in fiscal year 2011. The fiscal year 2007 was our best year in terms of collection of fee-based revenues. We collected approximately $18 million in fee-based revenues. That includes all three of the categories that I just described. Last year, that declined to $16.3 million. Our biggest decline was in our boating fees, which have declined 11%. We've also seen a decline in unrestricted revenue, but boating is the most significant decline that we have seen. Also, just to point out that our state funding has also declined substantially. Fiscal year 2006 was our best year for state funding. We received $1.7 million. That was a combination of state general funds and tourism dollars. That money is used primarily as match for state wildlife grant and Section 6 endangered species work. Funds quite a bit of our diversity division as well as fisheries, and back when we were flush with all that money, a substantial portion of it went towards things like nuisance wildlife, bear aware program. That has now declined in fiscal year 12 and 13. We were allowed to budget to a budget target of $650,000, substantial decline from what we had before. And that amount, I think we're going to hang on to it for all it's worth, but we know that's going to be attacked and sought through the budgeting process. So we expect that to be threatened as well. On page 6, annual operating budgets, just some very summary numbers. Fiscal year 2007, our best year for revenue, we spent approximately $29.5 million. Last year, fiscal year 10, we spent $30.3 million. For fiscal year 12 and 13, the expenditures are budgeted to increase to $32 million, nearly $2 million increase. That is not because of any new additions or expansions of programs. The majority of that is due solely to personnel costs, which are projected to increase by $2 million, simply because of the way we were required to budget by the Executive Budget Office. The assumption that we have to work under is that employee furloughs will go away, that employees' pay will be fully restored with merit salary increases, longevity pay, all those sorts of things. That is a $2 million hit. I don't think there is anybody in the state who realistically thinks that employees' pay is going to be restored in full in the next biennium. Nevertheless, that's the budget that we had to budget to. I fully anticipate at some point during the GovRec phase that number will be revised. They'll make decisions on what they're going to do with payroll, and that should reduce our budgeted expenditures quite a bit, which will help us. But until then, we had to balance a budget based on the targets they gave us. So we have a twofold issue. We have a unrealistic personnel figure we have to balance too, and also we do have declining revenues. On page 7, just a few issues on cost controls, things that we have done to try to contain costs. The 2010 special session, we had some reductions to travel. We had staffing reductions. We actually lost 3 positions in the last session. Currently, we are holding positions vacant. We have several key positions we're holding vacant, and on others, we're intentionally going slow on hiring simply to save money and help us come in under budget. Page 8, we do institute spending freezes every winter. We actually spend about 6 months out of every year imposing spending freezes where all non-essential expenditures are put on hold. That's due primarily to the amount of money that we balance forward from year to year, and some of those balances are declining. We, in the last couple of years, have just barely gotten through the fiscal year with sufficient cash through the winter. Over half of the fees that we collect in a fiscal year aren't recorded until after June 30, just as a result of the HUN application process and that sort of thing. So we get a little bit of revenue at the beginning of fiscal year, it all dries up, and then the end of the fiscal year we get additional revenues in. Makes it very difficult to manage. I mean, we do, but it makes it very difficult to plan and implement things. We end up scrambling at the last minute to try to get things done when we have the cash to do so. We also have been imposing freezes on many capital expenditures. There's a lot of things that we need to buy that we don't. In particular, vehicles are one of our biggest issues. We have a fleet of 217 vehicles. 42% of those vehicles have over 100,000 miles on them. For law enforcement, 40% of their vehicles have over 100,000 miles. And you know, a lot of our vehicles are kicking around the backcountry and taking a lot of abuse. That is a lot of vehicles to have that high mileage. As a comparison, the Nevada Highway Patrol replaces their vehicles at 80,000. And those are highway miles. So we have quite a bit of concern about the safety of our personnel, the reliability of those vehicles, and we also incur a lot of expenditures for large ticket repairs and that sort of thing that if we were able to replace our vehicles more timely, we would not incur. Page 9, fund balances. This gives you a picture for each fiscal year, starting with last fiscal year, on how much cash we're ending the year with for the various, for the 3 fee categories that we're concerned with. You can see the unrestricted fees, license dollars. We ended fiscal year 10 with $4.8 million based on the budget that we have prepared. We expect that to decline to $2.9 million by the end of fiscal year 2013. Just to give you a little perspective on that, my dream, my goal, is to end a fiscal year with at least $10.5 million. What that would do for us is would be to allow us to pre-fund a fiscal year. So we would start the fiscal year with sufficient cash for what we would use during that year. And this is, this doesn't take into account federal funds. Most of that we use to match federal funds. But that would allow us to plan and make it through the winter and be able to conduct business without having to shut everything down as we do currently. The boating account, this is where we have the most serious problem. We ended fiscal year 2010 with $920,000. As you can see on this chart, we, if we don't make any adjustments, would run out of money this current fiscal year. It's projecting a being in the red by $390,000, and that continues through 12 and 13. The assumptions we made for FY11, we adjusted the revenue to what we expected to receive, but we have not adjusted yet the budgeted expenditures. We're going to be going through that exercise over the next few weeks. There are some equipment, there's some boats. We have positions that we're holding vacant. I'm fully confident that we'll end the year in the black. We have to end the year in the black, but we certainly are facing a pretty significant issue with our boating program. It's really been hit 3 different ways. The boat registrations, as I showed you before, our revenue from that is down 11%. Our motorboat fuel tax that we get from DMV has also declined substantially, and the Federal Coast Guard grant has also declined substantially. So we got a triple whammy going on in that program. The restricted fees are holding pretty steady. There's a little bit of a drawdown of that, but we don't have too many concerns in that area. I'm on, excuse me, I'm on page 10 now. This just shows you the projected annual deficits for each of those categories during fiscal year 12 and 13. Total projected shortfall per year, $1.3 million, $1.1 million. And just a note that that does not include the $650,000 of general fund. If that is taken away, you could add that to that total, getting up close to $2 million shortfall. So, what do we do to close that gap? Well, because our biggest problem is this unrealistic payroll number, we didn't actually place anything in our budget to address those issues. We submitted our budget with those fund balance declines that I just showed you, and then we separately submitted a list of items for special consideration. Like I say, when that payroll number is readjusted, it'll change the picture a lot. I still think we're going to have some declining balances that we have to deal with, but the number will be much more reasonable. But what we did put in items for special consideration starts on page 11. We have proposed staffing reductions. We have targeted 14 positions for elimination in the next biennium. That's across divisions. And we picked these positions based largely on how they are funded. Some positions have a larger portion of their funding in fee-based revenue than they do in federal funds. For instance, some of our conservation educators in the conservation division doing general wildlife education are 100% or close to 100% fee-funded, whereas a biologist in the game division is 75% federally funded. We didn't propose any reductions in game or habitat, but we tried to spread it out across the divisions. The law enforcement reductions and the operations division reductions are primarily aimed at preserving boat revenues. All told, this would lower our payroll by about $900,000 a year, of which about $530,000 would be savings to fee-based revenues. Oh, Yes. Of those 14 positions, 7 of them are filled with current employees. Earlier this week, we met with all those people individually and let them know that at least tentatively their positions are slated for elimination. Not a fun process. We've tried to assure everybody that we have a ways to go before this becomes final, but we did let everybody know what the situation was, or is, I should say. On page 12, we also proposed a list of possible revenue increases. The first proposal we put forward was an increase in boat registration fees, since our boating program is where we have the biggest issue. What we proposed was a gradual increase on the increase of the fee. It starts at $5. Most boats, the registration would go up by a flat $5. When you get into the larger boats, that amount goes up a little bit. When you get to the largest boat category, 31 foot or larger, we proposed increasing that by $50. It's currently $100. That'd make it $150. Percent-wise, that's a pretty big increase. But you know, $150 to register a 31-foot boat didn't to us seem that burdensome. People may disagree, but it was tough trying to gauge how far we could go with that without impacting the number of registered boats. We really struggled with that one, but I think we've got something reasonable here. That would raise over $200,000 a year for the department. I should also point out that we split boat registrations with school districts. It would generate another $200,000 for school districts. The next proposal we put forward was commercial shed antler permits. That issue's been before this commission. We proposed establishing a fee of $1,500 for commercial collection, no fees for the hobby collections, just simply on the commercial collectors. Excuse me, my lunch is that is projected to generate about $187,000 a year. The next proposal we put forward was requiring hunting license for all species, not just game animals. You know, varmint hunting, ground squirrels, jackrabbits, that kind of thing. If you're going to hunt any kind of animal in Nevada, you would have to have a hunting permit, at least on public lands. Private lands would be exempted. And really this is aimed primarily at varmint hunts. There are varmint hunts that occur throughout the state, primarily attended by people from out of state who can come in and hunt Nevada wildlife at no cost. It does require our wardens' resources, and we think this would help us regulate that activity, as well as ensure that everybody who's hunting in Nevada has proper hunter safety training and that sort of thing. We anticipate that may generate $323,000 a year. I'm sorry, 320, yes, I said that right, 323,000. And the last proposed revenue increase is the habitat conservation fee. We proposed raising that by $2 for residents, $7 for non-residents, and a $2 fee on all the temporary fishing and hunting permits, which don't currently pay that fee at all. And we are interested in broadening some of the uses for that, still using it for resource management, but giving us a little bit more flexibility in the language to use it a little more broadly. That would generate about $415,000 a year. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Be happy to answer any questions.
First, I'd like to have on this public comment on it, and then we'll bring it back to the commission. Let's see, do we have anybody want to speak on this item 28? without going to the cards? Nobody? No one wants to talk about any of these nice little issues up here? Okay.
Wow.
Really? Okay, close public hearing. Let's move back to the commission. Mr. Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I was the only public member that attended the Finance Committee meeting Thursday, and I had a question about, I was prepared to suggest a letter to the Attorney General on the legality of us not reviewing the budget, but I think if we talk to the director and with Patrick, and hopefully they're devising a system where in the future we'll be able to, and I wanted to maybe explain it to the commission, where we'll be able to have the review of the budget with with a little bit newer system here. We'll be able to comply with that and give it to the commission to review and recommend, like the law says, in the future. And I think they're committed, as I understand it, to doing that, working with us and streamline and even give us some best guess numbers so we can, as a commission, can review it and keep within our legal requirements. And I think I'd like them to discuss that just a little bit for the rest of the commission.
All right. So, what'd you have on that?
For the record, Patrick Cates. You know, part of our difficulty this cycle was the budget split. It made it very difficult to be able to work through all the numbers and create new budgets early enough to give you any meaningful information. We did bring forward our budget split plan to a couple of Finance Committee meetings. We also presented our FY10 expenditures to the Finance Committee, which are the basis for 12 and 13. But where we had difficulty was being able to create these new budgets and show you what they actually look like with numbers. It was a very long, arduous process. This budget split is pretty unprecedented in state service, and it took a tremendous amount of time. If we were not making all these changes and we're just preparing a normal budget, I mean, the information that I was able to provide early on, like the FY10 expenditures, that would give you 99% of what's going to be in the new budget. And I'm confident that in a normal budget cycle, when we're not doing this type of split, that we would be able to give meaningful information early enough to this body for them to be able to review.
Mr. Capurro? Oh, let's go with Mr. Mayor first, and then we'll go with Mr. Capurro.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, we feel pretty confident with the new budget structure that we'll be able to provide this early enough for the commission. It won't be the final numbers because we're still getting revenue at the last moment, but you know, like you say, 90% there. And then at that point, we can get your ideas and we can start dovetailing it in to the planning as we're getting numbers. So I feel pretty confident we're going to be able to do that the next time around.
Mr. Capurro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also on the Finance Committee, along with Mr. Schrum, and of course, Charlie is the chairman. And all the things you've heard so far, we went through at length in that meeting, and that it was an arduous process, and I know staff was working long hours. I think Patrick said is caught up in the office there and that, but it is a process that hopefully will provide more transparency for reviewing what the budget really looks like, and that instead of having one massive account and then trying to figure out where you go from there. So I'm also confident that by the next cycle, we'll be able to have enough information to see where we're going. And again, part of the problem is that those numbers are changing. They'll change even after it's gone to the governor's office and that, right up to the time it's submitted to the Legislative Council Bureau and that. So it's, and then of course, no one knows what they're going to do with it. So the fact of the matter is that I was disappointed we weren't able to meet the statutory requirements this time. I am convinced they worked as hard as they could to do it in the atmosphere that they had to switch to a new system. But in the long run, that system, I think, will provide more information, more transparency. So I would congratulate staff on all the hard work that you did on it. The issues of, the caveat to this is there are revenue-producing issues in here that some of the sportsmen are going to have to take a look at and weigh in on at some point in time. And that today isn't the day to do that, but you're on warning that that there are revenue-producing items in here. Some of them probably long due because there haven't been increases. I'm not sure when the last increase in the boat one was, but it's a their responsibilities now are far more than they were in the past, especially with the quagga mussel problems and some other inspection issues and that they have. So it's costing more, and that's why you see that program revenue going down. And the economy, of course, has kicked the heck out of the number of people that are registering boats and the like. So again, just my congratulations to you for putting together what I thought was a pretty good summary in that. There was not enough time for us to be able to put a recommendation with respect to it, but I think I'm satisfied, as Mr. Lent indicated too, that by next cycle we'll be on the same page. So thank you.
Mr. Vogler?
Just out of curiosity, how many current employees do you have?
I have that number here somewhere. It's in the package I gave you too, but give me a second to find it.
I'm being lazy.
240-ish.
That's fine. Next question, what constitutes a commercial shed antler permit? What level do you go from recreation to commercial? I've never heard of anybody commercially doing it. Now, there's a guy over in Ely that builds chandeliers and stuff, but he buys them from people that pick them up. Who pays that fee?
For the record, Rob Bonamici, Chief Game Warden. The commercial shed antler, what we're looking at there is the collectors that come down from Montana, Wyoming, Oregon, Arizona, Utah, the various states, and they come over, they'll bring these big Wells cargo trailers and have a ATV in them or two, and then the rest of it is filled with antlers that they collect and they take back and sell to make knives, chandeliers, as you stated, and so forth. So there's big money in it. We've documented them staying up to 20, 30 days at Copper Queen Motel in Ely, which isn't the cheapest motel in Ely, and four-wheel drive pickups, ATVs. They're making a pretty good profit off our resources. And in the interim, there are also some of the people involved with habitat destruction going cross-country with the ATVs and so forth.
Chasing large bulls through the trees till they knock their horns off.
That occasionally happens as well.
My heartburn there is that my sheep herders are in those mountains all summer long, and some of them come off of those mountains with $2,000 and $3,000 worth of horns, which supplements their income and also makes them wander around a heck of a lot more, and for kind of watching my sheep and predator control. Where would they fall in this?
That we haven't developed a regulation or anything to address.
And how do you develop a H2A herder from Peru as a
So
I mean,
those are things we still have to look at as far as the details of, okay, do we want it if you collect over so many pounds,
Yeah.
you become a commercial collector. If you collect over an estimate of $5,000 value, do you become a commercial collector? So we got to look at that and come up with the best way to address that.
Bob, if you'd stay right there, this next question could be directed at you. Varmint hunting. I started shooting at varmints when I was, 5, 6 years old. I couldn't even get a hunter safety card when you're 5 or 6 years old. Hunters are getting old. We need people with enthusiasm that want to get involved in hunting. How do we rectify that? I understand maybe somebody coming in from another state, but rabbit hunting, coyote hunting, all these things, this is, family sport at my house. My daughters all hunt. I mean, it's just, but they start out when they're little kids. So are we drawing a line through all those little kids' names?
No, we're not. Not a one of them. What we're doing is looking at a hunting license requirement for hunting any wildlife on public land.
Okay, we run on 750,000 acres and 2,000 acres of it's private. How do I take them down the road?
We're not done yet. And then the other factor is we're not saying the requirements that are still on the books, 12 years of age, are still in place. So the 10-year-old kid, the 6-year-old kid, whoever you want to take out Plinkin, nothing changes there. That all stays the same. But what we are saying is once you reach the age of 12, if you're going to go out hunting coyotes, jackrabbits, and so forth, yes, you would need a hunting license. But that's not our target group by any means. Our target group are the individuals that are coming in primarily from out of state on the varmint hunts. We have other individuals in state that all they do is hunt coyotes and jackrabbits. Not a whole lot of those, but most of them are the non-residents that come in for the big varmint contest.
There's a bunch of them come in on the border hunting varmints, but let's put the real word out there. They're hunting coyotes, and they're coming over here because there seems to be an endless supply of them, I would guess. I don't know, but I mean, it's sort of like getting a freebie. We pay money to take out predators.
Well, it's not really a freebie because we expend quite a bit of time on those varmint contests, patrolling and addressing those issues. The loaded guns in the vehicles, the shooting from the roadways, the shooting at night, those type of deals where shooting at night is restricted. So there's time involved in patrolling those activities, and they're here making money off our resource, and we're expending money with no revenue.
And they are classified as varmints are classified as property of the state of Nevada, or are they a nuisance?
They're unprotected.
They're unprotected.
Classified as unprotected, like we
And
went through
do
yesterday.
you have the statutory support to regulate that?
Yes, we do. They're wildlife. They're considered wildlife in the state of Nevada.
Last question. Varmint tax, varmint tag, whatever you want to call it. How do I get licenses for 13 H2A herders? They also pack guns. They also shoot coyotes. They also are out there tramping around. And I can't even get a driver's license because they're considered Indian 94. They have an I-94 card, but they don't. I mean, it complicates my life. It seems like if they have to, you're going to make one in Spanish so they can pass a hunter safety test.
We might have to, but yes, we do have license provisions for non-residents, non-citizens, so that's not an issue. That's already in place.
But they're hunting varmints.
But they're hunting varmints, so they would need a hunting license.
If this is adopted,
if they're on public land.
They'd have to hunt. They'd have to pay for this too.
On public land.
There is no private. There's 87% of the state of Nevada is federally owned, and 97% of White Pine County is federally owned, and the rest is owned by the state going to Southern Nevada Water Authority. So there's no place they can be without being on federal land.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? That's good. Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to be on the record that we've stated here today that we do not need to change this regulation, that we review the budget before it goes to the budget office. In other words, we will not need to change that regulation because we'll be able to review it from here on out. Okay.
We will make every attempt to do what we need to do.
So there's no reason to change the regulation then?
No need to go to the legislature to change
Okay.
that.
I just wanted to hear that said. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had just a quick question, and I don't know if you can find this piece of paper, Patrick, but it says appropriations, fees, and miscellaneous revenues. And this is my first look at things, but this caught my eye. Mining assessments, and it's gone from 250,000 down in 07 down to 236,000 in 08. And 116,000 in 09, and it seems like that should be a number that's probably going up with the mining activity we had, so it just kind of caught my eye. Do you have any idea what's going on
For the record, Patrick Cates. You know, it fluctuates quite a bit. It did jump up quite a bit to 313,000 this last fiscal year. I have to admit I don't have a real good handle on those fluctuations.
Yeah, what's happened is that in the beginning, there's a limit of $10,000 per company, and it's based, and the fee is based on how much, I'll say use the word ore, but how much they process. And back in the day, there was all these different companies, and what they've done is consolidated. So you got fewer and fewer companies have bought up the smaller ones. And so now we're getting fewer people paying the assessment fee. It used to be a high of 500,000, and now we're down to 200,000. Excuse me? They cap out. So we've been in discussions with the Mining Association, and they are amenable to changing this legislative session. We told them that we would defer to them as far as what the cap should be. They understand the problem clearly. As you can imagine, they don't want to be the first out of the gate here saying we'll tax ourselves more for wildlife. So they want to play this out in the legislature, but they made a commitment to us that they would seriously look at that and actually find a legislator to carry this forward. It's in their best interest. They fund the mining biologists that work basically for them, if you do with environmental clearance, as well as the projects that we do as mitigation also go to assist them in their business pursuit. So we have a good relationship.
We better be first because they've got a big target on them
they
for
do.
this
They do.
session. Thank you.
All right. You know, I'm looking at here, and the things that do strike out at me are the commercial shed antler permits. We've talked about that some at the commission, and basically we've also spoken at that at the Mule Deer Restoration Committee. And, you know, there's so many items involved in that. It's such a broad issue, so many factors. It can require some more, you know, just trying to bypass the traditional cab commission process is what this appears to be. I mean, it goes right around the whole deal. And just coming out with, this is the solution. Don't know that this would not be the solution that a process might not end up with. I don't know what they might come up with. But to throw that out there and not go through a committee process to come up with this, and then to come out with 125 collectors, I mean, I guess you got to come up with a number from somewhere. And I mean, you know, I was talking about the Ouija board on the Bears before. It must be where you're coming up. Yeah, I mean, 125 people that are going to be willing to shell out $1,500 and not going to find a way around it. I mean, you're going to find a way around a lot of things. And when I'm throwing out, you know, these different items here, voting registration, I would not be surprised that it continues to drop for the duration of the recession, however long that might be. And, you know, if we left it the way it is, it'd probably drop. If you raise it, it might drop more. I don't know. You know, and we've talked about it a little bit on the phone deal, but, you know, where is that line? A lot of people are at that line now, clearly, or they would not have been dropping their $20 boat registration. I mean, $20, they dropped it for that. Add another 5, add another 50. Is it going to be worse? it might be worse because we add an additional fee, especially in this economic climate. And to say that, you know, it's going to actually generate money, it might make it worse. Might increase the tax on those that continue to want to pay it, and we might end up with less money afterwards. Don't know. Hunting license for all species, I just can't see that at all. And, you know, without having us go through the commission, public process, we could talk about it, see the pros and cons of it. But it is contrary to probably the best interest of wildlife to have this particular type of fee. These people are doing us a service. If we thought we were having a problem with the population, we would reclassify them as something else, and we would charge fees. There is, if anything, a problem with overabundance of these particular species. So therefore, the more harvest, the better. The best way to get the maximum harvest is to not require a license. I mean, we should be paying these people to come over here and do this work for us, some of them. Because it is what allows us to sell tags. It's what allows us to have our game populations, or at least some portion thereof. Habitat conservation fee, huh? It's worth that one is worth discussing. You have something else, Mr. Mayor? I can tell. Go ahead.
This begins the process. We will be bringing these BDR ideas to the legislative committee, as we said we would do at the subcommittee meeting, and then the public process of debating this certainly will go forward. The legislature starts in January or so, end of January. So February, yeah, not too soon, Mayor. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities for you to have your opinion and everybody else to have their opinion. So
fair enough.
Fair enough. Okay,
and on that, so that everybody at the cabs and everybody to have their opinion, what's your recommendation on how, the department's recommendation, I should state, for coming up with what would be the best way you could recommend for us to weigh in on these, us being the commission and the cabs and their constituents to weigh in on these subjects?
Well, to begin with, we're going to have this prepared for the subcommittee meeting on legislation, and that will then be provided the support material to the cabs. They're getting some of it now, and we're going to have plenty of time for people to ruminate on this and get together and talk about it. And they're also going to have an opportunity in the legislature if the BDR makes it that far. These are proposals to the executive branch. What's happening now is that Governor Gibbons, we've been given no instructions as far as revenue type legislation. We've been going under the concept of what we heard in the past. When we met with Andrew Klinger this last week, you know, his point was, well, we know whoever wins in November is going to have their own criteria. So they're going to take whatever the Gibbons executive budget is and make it into theirs. So this might get wiped off. They might say no fees whatsoever. They might see fees are okay, taxes are not. There's a $3 billion hole to fill. We don't really know. But what we had to do is come up with a mixture of savings and cutbacks that we're doing internally, which included personnel, unfortunately, as well as revenue ideas. And these were the revenue ideas we thought that were the most reasonable. I think a couple years down the road, we need to work with the sportsmen and the commission to look at a general fee increase so we can expand programs across the board in the hunting and fishing programs. These fees that we're talking about increasing are really not going to, you know, expand the game or the fisheries programs. This is addressing the shortfalls we currently have.
All right, Mr. Capurro.
One quick remark. I think these were put in here by staff simply to get the discussion going. We will have, and it was as Mr. Mayor indicated, we're going to have legislative committee hearings on this to allow the cabs and everybody else to input it, bring it back to the commission and the like before the legislature goes, so that we have an opportunity to to get on board with whatever should be done and that. And then, of course, there could be some changes that occur in the legislative session. Hopefully we're all on the same page on those changes. So I'm comfortable that the parameters to work with are here. We can discuss the details of it at a legislative committee meeting.
Mr. Lamb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in talking to the director, I think that if you're going to bring it up to sportsmen, you ought to put a deal on the website on the Hunter application. Would you, like the governor did to the school, would you be willing to donate money? How much, have a box like the Operation Game Thief? Would you be willing to donate and leave a blank and let them donate money when they apply on an application and see what kind of interest gets? Somebody might want to donate $200. Somebody want to donate $100. Why couldn't you do that? You can see what, if the sports are behind, increase in fees that way and see what you can get out of that. A donation.
The other thing I would mention, I challenged or asked Laura Richards to talk with the, I say the non-game side of the conservationist organizations about looking at a BDR to do something to produce revenue from the non-resource users, if you will. And they've taken that to heart, and they're currently working on that. It seemed to me that the sportsmen are the #1 conservationists, always have been. And there isn't a state in the nation that I know of that it really has a good program for getting the non-consumptive users to actually pay for native wildlife management, which, we have responsibility for native wildlife management. We call it the diversity division. We could call it native wildlife division, frankly. They're working on that, and I'll be interested to see what they've come up with. But a good faith effort on their part, and I feel pretty good that they will come up with something.
Even I meant consumptive users.
If anybody hasn't spoken yet, let's then go with Mr. Vogler.
I just have a quick question for you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm not asking you to be a clairvoyant, but federal funding, something in the air, T or whatever it is, they're not in a real big mood probably next year to be sending any more money out than they have to. You got any feel for what you'd have to do if that would drop by $2 or $3 million?
We got a bump in Pittman-Robertson funds 2 years in a row, I believe. And we belong to the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, OFWA, which their meeting is next week. And at OFWA level, they're paid lobbyists and represent all the state agency wildlife agencies. And they keep track of this pretty closely. The word we get back from the feds, there'll probably be about anywhere from 5 to 10% decline in Pittman-Robertson funds. It won't be in the several millions for sure, but there'll be a contraction there. We believe, but you never know till all the revenues generated.
And that's based on fewer fish hooks and rifle shells being bought.
Yeah, the bump was when Obama was elected. People were buying guns and ammos and primers, and they were afraid they might lose their weapons. Now all it'll take is a little bit of a flurry of that, and we'll be right back there. But I think people are calming down a little bit, if you will, and not spending as much on ammo. There's a movement afoot to try to expand the base of the tax. For instance, binoculars are not taxed. And we've been trying to get the birders to jump on board with us, and they've fought that. So there's a real effort afoot to broaden the base of items that are actually with the excise tax. So there's a lot of work being done at the DC level on that. But I don't see a real plunge. It may be a slow decline in it.
I don't know if I'd say that the fervor is gone. I think it's a lot of factor if their basements are just full of ammunition. But I have been somewhat in some of that industry, seen some of that. That might be somewhat the case. That's why it's fallen off. You can only hold so many thousands of rounds, so many tens of thousands in many people's cases. Okay, anything else from the commission? This was, okay, Mr. Shrum.
Mr. Cates, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this for me or not. It's a little bit off the wall, and I have no idea how much revenue these varmint hunts would generate for us. Like, would there be an exemption for, like, charity or nonprofit groups? I know this is a little bit out of line, because I'd never even heard of the varmint hunts before, and are they a big thing, or I assume that they attract quite a bit. So I was wondering that for the out-of-staters that come in,
Are done for charity. Not to say they won't be in the future or couldn't be, but no, we haven't looked at that angle at all as far as exempting them from charity.
yeah.
But it's something that,
Yeah.
we could consider should that become an issue.
I just wonder, because I know we're looking at any source of revenue that, we could come up with. So,
Yeah, the varmint hunting is quite prevalent throughout the West.
Yeah.
And Nevada is one of the hotbeds for it.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner, we're not, of course, asking for a fee to operate or hold a varmint hunt. We're just would like them to have a hunting license that they would go through hunter safety and then provide some revenue so that we can pay, instead of the sportsman paying for the monitoring and the enforcement of the laws of Nevada when those things are going on, so.
Okay, this was an action item, but I assume the committee didn't take any action. So is that?
I mentioned that at the start, that we were unable to take action because we didn't see it till Tuesday. And then we had their committee meeting on Thursday.
Right.
So
So I just want, so this is an action item. The committee did not take action. I'm looking for a motion. Or lack of a motion, or we want to just move on. Mr. Vogler.
There's one thing we're overlooking on these out-of-state guys. If they're gonna have to come in here and buy an out-of-state hunting license, gets to be a pretty expensive thing to come in there for a varmint thing. Do you have a proposal for a 2 or 3 day permit? I mean, I don't want hunting to be a sport of kings. I want the average guy that wants to go hunting to be able to hunt. And everybody that doesn't come over here in Bentleys and Rolls Royces to shoot coyotes off of Antelope Valley. So if they have to suddenly buy an out-of-state hunting license to come over here for a couple of varmint hunts, it's over. And so there will be that many fewer predators taken also, which is a bonus on the other side. I just, in a recession is no time to raise fees, taxes, or anything else. We all have to responsibly tighten our belt, same as they do at my house. I'm the last guy to get paid.
Excellent. I don't see any motions here. No motions. Seeing no motions. Oh, we have.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, what you got?
I move that this commission adopt the stand of the committee to take no action.
I second it.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded to adopt the stand of the committee and take no action at this time. Everybody understand the motion? Any further discussion? All in favor for the motion signify by stating aye. All opposed? Was that an aye? Or, okay, was that an aye or a nay? Okay, we have 5, 6. We have 7 in favor and Mr. Vogler opposed. Motion passes.